What is going on, Pats Nation? You guys already know who it is. Patriots Global here, back with another video, and in this one, I want to touch upon the Isaiah Wynn situation, something that I'm pretty sure every media member surrounding the New England Patriots is doing right now, but I want to give you guys some of my thoughts on this. I kind of want to touch upon this topic. So I know that it's one that you've probably heard a lot by now, but just stay with me. Now, I want to start off by saying that nothing has been said from the team. It's not been said that the team is shopping him. It's not been said that the team has put him on the trade block. This is all speculation by media up to this point, mainly surfacing from Isaiah Wynn not showing up to OTAs. Now, say what you want about him not showing up to OTAs. It's really all opinion-based due to the fact that OTAs, the organized team activities, are optional. You know, if he doesn't show up for minicamp or he doesn't show up for training camp, this is where you start to have concern. This is where the storyline starts to get bigger when it's a mandatory camp, a mandatory practice to be at. But up until this point, Isaiah Wynn just decided not to show up to the optional practices, which is the same thing that he decided to do last year. And unfortunately, Isaiah Wynn has kind of put himself in a standpoint where he's not a fan favorite. It's not necessarily that fans hate him. You can't say fans love him since he was a first-round pick by the Patriots back in the 2018 draft. And since then has not been able to start a full season. You also barely see him supporting Boston teams. That's not to say you never do, but you rarely see him at Celtics games or Bruins games or Red Sox games, and then he doesn't show up to practice unless he absolutely has to. So from a fan perspective, I don't think any Patriots fan really cares if Isaiah Wynn goes, but I think it's more so from a football standpoint where that conversation really starts to come in. Now, Isaiah Wynn is in the final year of his contract. Now, technically, he was in the final year of his contract last year, but the Patriots did decide to place that fifth-year option on him. He decided to pick up that fifth-year option, which is costing them about $10.4 million for this upcoming season, which a fifth-year option, by the way, is completely guaranteed. A move that I think surprised a lot of us Patriots fans because $10.4 million for Isaiah Wynn, you can bargain or you can really argue that Isaiah Wynn is or is not worth $10.4 million guaranteed for 1 year, especially compared to how he played in that 2021 season. Now, like I mentioned, Isaiah Wynn, since being drafted, was not able to play an entire season in the NFL, but in 2020, which was arguably his best season, of course, despite playing very minimal games, if we're going to talk about his best season based on the amount of games he played, then health-wise, it would be this past season. But in 2020, when we actually were able to see him on the field, he performed very, very well, and unfortunately took a step back in 2021. So in 2020, he played 641 offensive snaps, 2 penalties, and allowed 3 sacks. He had an overall grade of 82.6 with a pass blocking grade of 75.2 and a run blocking grade of 81.8. Then this past year, in 2021, he played 915 offensive snaps, 9 penalties, and 6 sacks allowed. He put up an overall grade of 74.9, a pass block grade of 70.7, and a run blocking grade of 76.5. And like I mentioned, he did the same thing with optional practices, aka OTAs, this time last year, and I really believe that's what caused him to start the season off really slow. Now, the Patriots really did kind of jumble around that offensive line, especially at left guard. They ended up going with that veteran left guard towards the middle half of the season with Ted Karras to kind of help stabilize Isaiah Wynn a little bit more. But nonetheless, Isaiah Wynn did not start off this season good at all, and then towards the end of the season did go out for a few games because of injury. And unfortunately, kind of going with the question of should the Patriots trade Isaiah Wynn isn't as simple of a yes or no answer because there's several different avenues that go about this storyline. Now, unfortunately, the Patriots are in a position cap-wise with only about $400,000 to $500,000 entering this 2022 season, and that's not going to be enough. They are going to have to extend guys, cut guys, trade guys, restructure in order to get to the necessary amount of money they need, even for the players that are on this current roster because of in-game sign-as bonuses and whatnot. Not to mention the fact that the Patriots do like to enter the start of the season with a few $1 million in case they want to make any last-minute moves. Of course, not to mention the fact either that this entire 2022 draft class has not been signed yet. If you do get rid of Isaiah Wynn, that again does free up about $10.4 million, in which the Patriots would have then more than enough money to sign the rest of that draft class, go into the season with the necessary amount of money to be able to make some additions if you choose to do so, one or two last additions, but of course, give the current players on your roster the money that they are expected under contract, and just overall give you that necessary wiggle room that you only had to make by trading one guy versus having to cut multiple guys or extending other guys. So that's one way to look at it, is that with one swoop, with one player gone, you solve a much bigger issue. But then, of course, comes the concern with the offensive line, and already the people that the Patriots lost this offseason, whether that is players or that was personnel on the offense. Not just the offensive line, but even your offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. And if you want to look from a player perspective, the Patriots lost their left guard in Ted Karras, who Michael Onwenu is expected to be plugged in there. And you traded Shaq Mason over at your right guard. So that's, you trade Isaiah Wynn. That's 3 out of your 5 starters from this past season. You want to keep that continuity along the offensive line, something we talked about all of last season when this O-line was struggling. Do you really want to potentially make this offense struggle even more, adding another layer on top of these things you need to figure out offensively with not a rookie quarterback, but a second-year quarterback in Mac Jones that you're expecting to take this big second-year leap? So to me, it comes all down to who is the guy next to Isaiah Wynn. And there's a couple of different moves the Patriots could go to. You have a guy like Yanni Kajust. You have someone like Andrew Stuber. You have a lot of depth guys that could come in, and maybe one of those guys shows out because they might not be up to par with what Isaiah Wynn is going to give you 100% or even better. But even if they're 80% of what Isaiah Wynn is going to give you, Bill Belichick is going to roll with that if it means giving up that cap space. So there's 2 instances where I do believe that the Patriots would let go of Isaiah Wynn, and that's Trent Brown works out well for them over at left tackle, and then they have a guy at right tackle that they're comfortable with. Whether that is, Andrew Stuber coming in, Yanni Kajust, whether that's putting Michael Onwenu over to right tackle and then putting a rookie like Chasen Hines in over at right guard. Maybe that's something that the Patriots decide to do, or whether that's keeping continuity along this offensive line as much as you can and only replacing left tackle with someone, again, like maybe Yanni Kajust or, like a Will Sherman or whatnot. If the Patriots were to make a trade, this is something I don't expect this week, next week, or even this month, let alone even next month. This could be like a Sony Michel type trade where maybe you go into preseason, and at the end of the preseason or the beginning of preseason, you go ahead and you decide to trade Isaiah Wynn. When you see how these guys have developed throughout the offseason, right before the start of your season, where you're going to have to make some tough cuts, some tough moves, some players around the league are going to be injured, when arguably the market for Isaiah Wynn would be highest. Because you trade him now, most guys around the NFL are healthy, right? You trade him now, you don't know if that guy behind Isaiah Wynn is going to work out or not. You trade him right before the start of the season, that market for him likely is going to be higher with guys being injured from training camp and preseason. And 2, you know what you're going to get with the guys behind him. Now, before we talk about this storyline, I want to give a big shout out to the sponsors of this channel, BetOnline.ag. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's NBA Finals, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball scores, and the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. BetOnline, guys, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and of course, even more. All you guys have to do, if you're interested, which you definitely should be, is head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive a 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit using that promo code CLNS50 to get the bonus and get right into the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So now it comes down to the idea of compensation. You trade Isaiah Wynn. What are you going to get? More importantly, is it worth what you're going to get now versus keeping him and then letting him hit free agency at the end of the season and then getting a comp hit back in return? And that, my friends, all comes down to, okay, what are other teams offering for Isaiah Wynn? How do you maximize that capital for Wynn if you are looking to trade him right now? I think that question also comes down to, right now, are you looking to get draft capital, or overall, are you just looking to free up money? Because if you're just looking to free up money, Patriots probably won't care if they get a, 5th or 6th round pick back, versus if they say, you know what, there's other ways we can free up cap space. We want the draft pick more. Let him hit free agency at the end of the season and get that comp pick. So my overall thought is that Bill Belichick will trade Isaiah Wynn if he gets anything better than a 3rd round pick. Depending on the 3rd round pick, I think he could still trade him. But if you get a 2nd round pick, if you get a 3rd round pick, anything better than that, I could see Bill Belichick wiping his hands and saying, you know what? Okay. But I don't think for less than that, Bill Belichick is going to say, okay, I'll ship him off. Left tackle is still a very important position. You want continuity, especially left tackle being the blind side to Mac Jones. It's still going to be very important to keep him around. This is a storyline I think we really do need to keep continuing to monitor and continuing to watch, because this is a very, very real storyline that is being talked about for a reason. Again, if he is to be traded, they should not trade him until right before the start of the regular season. So, there's that couple of weeks before the start of the season and the last preseason game. I think that's kind of that perfect time where you could trade Isaiah Wynn, or maybe even a week before that. My overall prediction on what is going to happen is that Bill Belichick is going to keep Isaiah Wynn. Like I said, Wynn did this last year. As long as he's not holding out of mandatory practices and he's not getting injured, nothing like that, he's not holding out, then I think Belichick keeps him. He keeps him at left tackle for this season under that $10 million hit. He hits free agency at the end of the season, signs a big deal. Patriots get a comp pick back, and then we're done with this whole Isaiah Wynn conversation. But what are your guys' thoughts on Isaiah Wynn and this whole storyline? Let me know in the comment section below. Remember to leave a big like on this video and subscribe to the channel for all of your New England Patriots news. But like always, I appreciate you guys for watching, and go Pats.